if I was starting out again with zero money and know what I know, the first thing I would do is I would learn how to property manage or manage people, really, is what you're doing. I worked hard to get proficient at that, and I would do master leasing. And you can do it with no money, absolutely no money, control the property and create a cash flow with very little risk. That'd be one thing I would do. If I were starting out fresh again with no money and I didn't even know anything about it back in those days.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Carrot Cast podcast. I'm your host, Brady Winder, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Leon Johnson, who has been investing for over 47 years and is going to share some golden nuggets, some really good wisdom on creative finance. For context, Leon Johnson is becoming one of the most popular guys in the real estate investing circuit. He's got a podcast with Steve Trang on real estate disruptors that has hit over 60,000 views. So congratulations for that. But our goal with this episode, as Leon was just telling me before we started recording, was to help you as an investor not leave so much money on the table. So Leon, welcome to the podcast. You mind if I start by asking you a personal question, Leon?
You can ask me anything you want to.
I like that. How much money have you made from real estate over the past 40 odd years?
Oh my gosh, I never stopped to think about that. I could not tell you. Could not tell you. It's just been a lot of fun.
Oh,
A lot of
that's
fun.
awesome. As long as you're having fun, time keeps going.
Yeah.
Well, let's start, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into real estate, why you're still waking up to do this every day, and especially considering you didn't stop to think about the money, because that's the one thing most people are always stopping to think about. I think that's funny. But yeah, what's your backstory? And then we'll get into some creative finance strategies here.
Well, I'll try to make this quick because it's a long story, 47 years. But when I was in the military, I had a lot of spare time. I targeted nuclear missiles and had a lot of time to read. And, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do when I quit targeting missiles. And so I read a lot of real estate textbooks. And I decided I wanted to get a real estate license, and I went visiting some local realtors' offices near the base, and one of those guys was real interested, and he said, started asking me questions, and I was surprised myself that I knew everything he was asking, technical questions, because I'd read these books, and he said, well, I think you should get your broker's license. And I did. 1975, I got my real estate broker's license while I was still in the military. Played realtor for a couple of years, and I had some opportunities that just slapped me in the face about 4 or 5 times to wake me up to what was in front of me. And once I took advantage of some of those, it didn't take me long not to be in real estate realtor sales and that end of the ball game, and just went straight investments and been doing it ever since.
4 or 5 times. What were those opportunities that so kindly slapped you in the face?
Well, it was one deal, and it was a guy that worked at the service station across the street from the real estate office that I was managing. And on the other corner, there was a little bar. And as a realtor working really hard, or a manager, sometimes you don't have time to eat. So I would run over to the bar and get a hot dog for lunch. And the guy who had changed my oil was over there, and he said, look, I need to sell my house. And I said, well, when do you want me to come by? He said, Saturday. So I go by there, and I do my typical realtor thing and did a market analysis and told him what the house should sell for, which at that time, 55,000 is what I told him. Is a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, full 2-car garage, full basement, and a very nice subdivision house. And he said, well, no, I need to sell it fast. And I said, well, we could lower the price to 49,000. He said, no, I need to sell it real fast. Why don't you buy it? And I said, well, how much you want for it? He said, well, I'll take what I paid for it 3 years before. And I said, what's that? And he said, $21,900. And so he goes back and he brings a letter that he's being foreclosed on. And make a long story short, I put up $3,000 and bought that house subject to. This was in 1977, I think. Bought the house subject to, and that's where I brought Adam's older brother, my first child, home to. I moved into that house. And he had a $5,000 IRS lien, which I had to get off. I paid $500 and got him to release the lien, paid the ex-wife $800, cleared up a couple other little title problems. And when the smoke cleared, I thought, dadgum, I just picked up like $25,000 in equity in this thing. My payment's only a couple $100 a month. How can I do a repeat of this? So I found out all about trustee sales, and I started hitting every trustee sale there was in that whole county. And we bought a lot of houses subject to back in those days, long before it was as popular as it is today.
Oh, absolutely. There's no better way to get your family started than that, sounds like, walking in with that equity. So for people not as familiar with creative finance and subject to specifically, well, I want to get into the details and kind of talk about how you structure some of these. But first, who would you say creative finance is best suited for, and when? Is it any old investor?
Absolutely everybody that has anything to do with real estate, whether it's a seller, buyer, real estate agent, flippers, rehabbers. It works in all those cases. Commercial real estate, mobile home parks, mobile homes. There's just no end to what you can do with it.
And at any point in the journey, it seems like it doesn't matter whether you're starting out or whether you've been doing it for a long time. There's no reason why not.
Oh, no. And starting out, especially, there's so many things you can do starting out. If I was starting out again with zero money and know what I know, the first thing I would do is I would learn how to property manage, or manage people, really, is what you're doing. And I worked hard to get proficient at that. And I would do master leasing. And you can do it with no money, absolutely no money, control the property, and create a cash flow with very little risk. I would do that. That'd be one thing I would do. If I were starting out fresh again with no money, and I didn't even know anything about it back in those days.
You've already piqued my interest and changed my question, so I'm going to do away with my script. Tell me about master leasing.
Okay. All right. Well, basically, it's a sandwich lease, and it's been done in commercial real estate for years, but you can do it with single family houses. You can do it with apartment complexes, commercial buildings, or whatever. And what it really boils down to is you agree to lease a property, minimum, say, 5 years or longer, even 10 years, from an owner. You turn around and lease it out to the end user and get a spread, and you keep the spread. And that can be done on two bases. Number one, it can be on what I call a performance basis. And let's look at a typical property management company, and you would go to them with your house, and you would want them to manage that property for you. Odds are what they're going to do is they're going to charge you a 10% fee each month, and it comes off what they collect in rent. And if they don't have it rented 1 month, they don't collect a fee. Okay. With master leasing, you can do basically the same thing on a performance basis, and you only pay them on your lease to them when you collect on your lease that you've leased out. And you might keep 10% or more as a spread to make your money off the deal. And a big exciting thing is, if you are a realtor and in property management, you make $100,000 management fees, you're going to pay $15,300 in FICA taxes on that. But if you made that same $100,000, and the income taxes, of course, but if you do it as rents and you're collecting rent as your spread, then you don't have FICA tax on that. So you'd save $15,000 a year master leasing, as opposed to being a realtor in property management.
Interesting. Wow, that's a lot of savings. I never thought about structuring it like that. Do you have any go-to, I mean, maybe subject to, do you have any go-to creative finance strategies or ones you like to pull most often?
Well, long ago when I first started out, I'd go to a lot of seminars. One of the first ones I went to was Jack Miller and John Schaub, making it big on little deals in 1978 in Kansas City. It changed my whole life.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever heard of them or not, but John Schaub has a book that's been a bestseller for 20 or 30 years on Amazon. It's called Building Wealth One House at a Time.
Hmm.
Great book. But anyway, I learned a lot of techniques and I became technique driven. And so what I would do, I'd take a technique and try to go find a place to fit it in. And that's doing it totally backwards than the way you should do it.
Hmm.
You should get a bunch of tools in your tool belt and then go assess the problem and decide which tool you pull out. Don't be technique driven. But there's just a lot of things you can do, using other properties as collateral. Just to give you a quick, for instance, that house that I told you about that I ended up with, I ended up renting that house and keeping it for several years, and it's worth close to $300,000 now. And I bought it for 21.9. But there was one thing that I did that I regret somewhere along the way. I sold that house, and that's some of
Huh.
the biggest regrets I have is selling properties and not keeping more of what I sold back in the day.
Hmm.
Um, so let me tell you what I did. I had that and other houses that I'd bought, and I found this new technique called carrybacks. And really, what it is substitution of collateral. So there was another. Boy, I couldn't wait to use this technique, and I found this house. The lady had inherited it. She wanted 22,000. She wanted for the house, and I talked her into financing with 3,000 down, owner finance, which you
Hmm.
never say those words, seller finance, owner finance, creative finance to a seller. You never ever use them. They're dirty words. Don't use them. Okay. So what I did is I went to this lady and I said, look, I'll give you your 3,000 down, but instead of using your house as collateral, I'd like to use a couple other houses that I have as collateral. And I put her in the car and drove around, showed her the houses, and we put $9,500 second mortgages on two houses, 9,500 each for her 19,000. So she was secured in a second position on two houses, and it left the one I was buying free and clear.
Hmm.
And I went to the bank and borrowed $20,000 on that house, gave her 3,000 out of it for the down payment. And I went home with another house and 17 cash to go buy other houses with. And I bought several other houses subject to with that 17.5.
And just rinse and repeat.
Just renting them out. And the rents from those first and seconds on those two houses paid the notes.
Wow. So those two other houses that you used for collateral, were those ones that you owned outright?
No, they were. I had a first mortgage on them, and so what
Oh,
her 9,500 was a second on
that's
there.
right.
But the rents were good enough to make payments on both those loans, on both of them. So
Wow.
I didn't have any negative cash flow.
Interesting. Okay. That's creative there. So you had mentioned your one regret was selling that property and not holding on to more. A lot of our listeners are wholesaling as their exit strategy. Um, Talk to me about how creative finance and subject to some of these strategies play a role in the future. We don't know where the economy is headed. I guess what advice would you give to people that are wholesaling right now? How
Uh,
might they need to pivot?
well, they don't necessarily need to pivot. Keep doing the same thing they're doing. Get Carrot to help you find all those properties. But when you go out there, don't go with just with a hammer to try to solve every problem, which is buying at 60 cents on the dollar. A lot of people focus on price, and I will pay their full value asking price plus sometimes if I get the right terms. Flipping and wholesaling is a business. Okay, it's a business, and you're buying inventory and selling inventory is what you're doing. And that's subject to FICA tax. Okay. And once you sell that, you've killed the chicken. There's no more income going to come from that property. And yeah, you might make a quick lump sum and you might make a really high income, but what you have is a job, and you might be the boss, but if things go south, like it might here in the future, it might be hard to have an end buyer for those properties, and things could slow way up. But assuming it doesn't, when you're at that kitchen table and buying that house and they will not sell it for a wholesale price, you should go for wholesale terms. And that's long terms. In the recent past, we bought 4 houses from folks that are over 70 and got 30-year terms, no balloons, at like 3% and 1.5% interest.
Holy cow.
So while you're in, when they leave that kitchen table and those folks won't take that low wholesale price cash offer, they might be willing to take a higher price and get you good terms that you can keep that house and pass it down to your kids. And that's how you build real wealth, is by holding that property, not turning around and selling it.
I've got so many questions for you. My mind's just ping, ping, ping.
Fire away. I didn't think this would last just 30 minutes.
Oh, no, it never does. You mentioned people management earlier in our conversation. Mm-hmm. People management. Why? Like, what's the story behind that? I understand you've had multiple business over the years outside real estate, insurance agencies. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. What does people management have to do with creative finance?
Well, I'm a buy and hold kind of guy. And now we've done wholesaling, we've built new bills, we've done all that stuff, in all kinds of areas. But I am a buy and hold kind of guy. I like that mailbox money every month. And so you got to be a good property manager. And it's not that hard to do. People get afraid of, I'll never do that. Tenants tear your property up. Yeah, some of them will. Do I screw up every now and then? I screw up. I get a bad one, and lose 2 or 3 months rent trying to get the fleas and the roaches out, and the urine smell, and on and on and on. Yeah, we screw up every now and then, but for the most part, my longest tenant was 23 years.
Oh, wow.
My longest right now is about 15 or 16 years. And we've got a whole bunch, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And so you're dealing with people, and they're your most valuable asset. Your tenants are, not the sticks, bricks, and dirt. So if you treat them right, learn how to manage them, put some systems in place so that you can get a great long-term tenant, that's how you build wealth. You never buy anything your tenants can't afford.
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of funny. It's like you bring up excuse me, you bring up property management, and that probably, brings PTSD for some people. Oh, I've tried that, been down that road. I don't want to do it.
Yeah. But it's really simple, and it's also a currency. It's a currency, and if you know how to do it, you could do master leasing.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And to find these properties, some will, some won't. So what? So using Carrot to prospect and find those sellers. When you're in that kitchen door, don't walk away when you can get a good long-term financing on that thing.
Yeah. Well, I like what you had said about, I feel like when most people are thinking of property management, thinking of being a landlord, your focus is, how do I protect what I have? It's like, how do I have the right legal things in place, and how do I have the right systems and employees in place to protect my assets? But your approach from it is almost the total opposite. It's like, I have a human being, I have a person in this property. How can I serve them really well? And it sounds to me like, the proof is in what you're telling me, is that you have these long-term tenants, is that takes care of a lot of the other problems. Have your ducks in a row, have your insurance. You're going to have some bad ones over the years, but I like that approach.
Yeah. And let's flip the coin. Let's say you don't want to have anything to do with property management. Let me tell you what, there is an army across this country of people who know how to do master leasing. So you could master lease it to someone else and let them do it.
Yeah.
I have a friend and a mentor. If it's more than 12 miles from his house, he master leases it to someone.
Hmm.
And nobody knows how to manage better than him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, there's always a way to work through these things.
So Leon, walk me through this. You had mentioned if you can't get the wholesale price, then you're looking at terms, you're looking at other options. Walk me through this when you're sitting down at the kitchen table with the seller and you can't get the price you want. How do you even start? Just what's that conversation look like? You said you told me the no words. We can't say creative finance.
Right. If you call somebody on the phone and say, hey, would you owner finance that? No, click. You're just not going to get it. But, you sit down and show them the benefits of it. Now, let me give you for instance, there was a house that Adam had mailed a letter to this lady. And she had inherited her mom's house. And this lady had been licensed as an attorney in 3 states. She's not a dummy. Okay. So Adam goes to her house. He walks there. It's a big old 2-story house, and it's free and clear. Had hardwood floor about an inch thick, but there was a problem. In one room, the ceiling was falling in, and the hardwood floor had peeled up and back, and a lot of other problems with the house. And we figured about $18,000-$20,000 of work to be done on the house. And of course, Mississippi house prices are a lot less than they are in other parts of the country. But you just add a zero to this or whatever. But he offered her $60,000. We figured the house was worth 125, 130, something like that. And she would not take a penny less than 100,000. She just was not going to do it. She would lose it before she would do that. And she did not have the money to fix it up. And there was one other thing. She was about a month and a half away from losing the property for not paying the taxes 3 years back. She hadn't paid property taxes for 3 years. She was about to lose it. So finally, Adam said, okay, I'll tell you what, we'll give you $100,000 for your house. And here's how we'll do it. We're going to give you $10,000 down. And he knew what she wanted to do. We found out all that. And he said, we'll pay you $500 a month for 180 payments. And if you add that up, that's $90,000. And there's no interest on that. And she said, okay, I'll do that. So that's what we did. And we got 1, 2, 3 more bites out of that apple. A year later, she was in trouble, called me up. Well, I found out she needed money. I called her up and I said, look, I've got an extra $5,000. I'll pay you a year in advance for $5,000. She said, oh, you don't know how that would help me right now. So if you calculate that, that's a 10 for 12 is what that's called. And that's about a 35% return on my $5,000. So a few weeks later, she said, you don't happen to have a mobile home or something I can move into? I'm living with my friends. So I just happened to have just bought this older mobile home, and I had like $10,000 in it. And I said, how are you going to buy it from me? And she said, well, I do have a couple $1,000 a month income. And she had all these dogs. And this was out on some land. And I said, look, I'll give you the title to that mobile home, X 36 months of payments. So that's $18,000. She said, yeah, I'll do that. And but now she's got to pay me $200 a month in rent for the lot rent. And it's going to be like 46 months before I start paying her $5,000 a month again.
Right.
And the loan balance was 59,000. And she was scared I was going to sell the land out from under her. So I traded the land. I'm making this real short, a lot of other details. I traded her the land, which Adam and I had about 12,000 in it, for the payoff on that $59,000 loan.
Holy cow.
But it wasn't a 59,000 payoff. You understand when somebody, she had an emotional attachment to the house, but she didn't have an emotional attachment to that 500 a month. And the other side of the coin was she was going to have to start paying me 200 a month. But the piece of land had another mobile home on it that was bringing $200 a month. So when I traded her the land, it increased her cash flow by 400 a month. She didn't have to pay me. She's collecting the 200. And I gave her an extra $8,000 cash in that deal. And she gave me back the note of 59,000, canceled it out.
Yeah.
So I had a free and clear house in a couple years after that particular deal.
That's amazing. Holy cow.
And we put like 20,000 in the house, and when the smoke cleared, we had about 62 in it. So we came out way better than we would have had we paid her 60 cash and put 20,000 fix up.
Do a lot of the deals go like this? What I mean is like, or when you bring up creative financing, without saying creative financing, when you're introducing terms to people, are they usually receptive to it?
Not at first. You have to sit down and talk to them. And you can write this down, IRS publication 537. Print it out and read it. It's about a 20-page IRS publication that has to do with installment sales. And that's the word you use. And I usually print out a copy and bring it to them, especially if they're an investor that's ready to get out. Show them how they can save money on taxes and get an income better than they would otherwise. So many times it's way better for them to do an installment sale than it is to take all cash. And we could get into that. That'd take another 30, 40 minutes, but maybe another podcast. But see, your guys that are doing all the wholesaling stuff, why not take advantage of these opportunities and have that as another tool in the toolbox to do simple owner financing?
Speaking of someone that's like, okay, I finally need to do this. I need to try this creative finance thing. What's a realistic time frame? How long would it take them to learn how to do this or how to do it confidently?
Oh, you're talking about the investor?
Yes. Yeah, the investor.
Well, they can see me in Las Vegas in November at Gary Johnston's deal. I'm speaking on it for 3 days. And there's John Schaub, the guy who wrote the book that I'm telling you about, is one of the speakers. Pete Fortunato is going to be there, and Gary Johnston, and John Hire the third, who's probably one of the best tax attorneys in the country.
That's awesome.
We're all speaking 3 days. So
we'll make sure to put a link to it in the show notes here and on the blog post. That's awesome.
Okay, all right, that's good deal. But another thing, get this book and read it.
What is that? Debt? What's this?
Invest in Debt.
Invest in Debt. Okay.
Jimmy Napier. You can get it for $20 at GaryJohnston.com. Amazon, it might be $80.
And that's creative finance subject to specifically?
It's about notes, and you can learn the math of the notes. The first time I'd read that book years ago, I got halfway through it, made a phone call, made $14,000.
That pays for itself.
Yeah, I had bought. This is another thing I bought with creative financing was H&R Block franchises. We bought several of those using creative finance, owner finance, and in this particular case, I was making annual payments of like $14,000 on this one office we'd bought, and it's off season. I'm sitting there reading this book, and it made me think of something. I'm making these payments. Well, I'd made the annual payment like 2 months before, 3 months before, something like that. And the balance on my note was $42,000. And it had accrued like 2,000 in interest by the time I called this lady. And I called her up and I said, look, I don't know if it'll help you or not, but I've got an extra $30,000 that if you'll take it as a payoff, I can get you a cashier's check. She said, well, let me talk to my husband. I'll call you back. She called me back in about an hour and said, we'll do it.
Hmm.
So I bought back that note at a $14,000 discount.
So we're almost out of time here. We could just talk all day.
I can stay as long as you want. I'm good today.
Well, a couple more questions and we'll kind of wrap it up. Leon, is any other methods? We talked about, master leasing, we talked about carrybacks. Any other methods that you like to go to or creative strategies that people would probably like to hear about?
Sure. Lease with options or straight options. Options are super powerful. And you can do them with a lease or not with a lease. And you can structure those to where you can structure an option so that you can be the beneficiary of any mortgage pay down, any amortization, and appreciation, both. You can do that with an option. And but options, lease with options is almost, if you structure it correctly, is just as good as seller financing. But seller financing is so flexible. You can do so many things with it. I mean, it's good for realtors. It's good for buyers. It's good for sellers. A rehabber, a flipper can buy a property and buy it subject to and get the seller to hold the note until you get it sold and not have to come up with their equity right at the moment. I mean, there's just so many ways to do it. Gosh.
Yeah.
And the key is, realtors sell sticks, bricks, and dirt, the house, the dirt, all those kind of things. And they rarely find out about the people. And if you spend more time finding out what the people's situation is and what you can truly do to help them, you have to care when you go in there. You have to care enough to ask. And when you ask and find their situation and their motivation and what it is that they want, you'll find out that the relief of distress carries rewards greater than price. And you can help people solve problems, give them freedom and peace, and end up with a lot more properties that you can hold long term that you can build wealth with.
You have to care enough to ask. I love that. Last question for you. I'm curious, if you have already shared it, and that's fine too. What's the best deal you ever done?
Oh my gosh. Probably one I did for someone else that I didn't even participate in.
Oh yeah.
I have a cousin who's alcoholic, got on drugs off and on, almost homeless, and he had found this house that was vacant. And in Mississippi, we have 16 section properties. And this particular one, the folks had refinanced it, pulled out like $120,000 or $30,000, and then moved out. Didn't fix it up, didn't make any payments or anything. The mortgage company was in bankruptcy.
Oh gosh.
And this property is on 16th section in Mississippi. Every 16th section is set aside, and the schools own the 16th section in every township. And all you have to do is pay them a little annual rent, like $250, $300 for a lot, and pay the property taxes on it. So I got him into this house, and he lived there about 20 years, paying about $500 or $600 a year for property taxes and leases on that property, and I never got a penny out of it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the best, I guess you could say. But gosh, there's just been so many, just a little tiny deal that I just did about 3 years ago. Um, it's a little town that about 90% of the people in that town's on welfare. A little southern Mississippi town. And one of our associates called me one day and he said, "Hey, Mr. Leon, I've got a house in this little town that he said that you might be interested." And I said, "Nah, probably not interested in that town." And he said, "Well, you might get owner financing." I said, "Oh, well, when can we meet?" So in about 45 minutes, I was there. And an hour later, we had written a contract, nothing down, 300 a month. I think it was 165 payments on this little house, 3% interest, and nothing down.
Hmm.
And I paid him a couple thousand for his wholesale fee. And so this guy just wanted to move back to Texas, and it was across from a park, good area, nothing wrong with it. I turned around and sold that house for $54,900, $5,000 down, and never even had it cleaned or anything. Okay.
Why? Well, sorry, I want to ask, why is the wholesaler not doing creative finance? Why is he not doing it? I mean, it's a few $100.
He's starting to since then.
Okay, that works. I can accept that. That makes sense.
And it was just this level of understanding at that point, new wholesaler. And anyway, and Adam and those guys tend to call me when they get a lead from you guys that says, "Hey, it's a possible owner finance." They just have a habit of calling me. So anyway, I sold this thing, 5,000 down, 500 a month for 180 payments. All right. So right off the bat, I picked up $3,000, have no money in the deal, and I'm picking up 200 a month. Except I offered a guy to pay him a year in advance for a 15% discount on those annual payments. And I've been doing it every year. And as a matter of fact, it's coming up in September. I got to call him today and ask him if he wants to do it again. So I'm going to pay him a year in advance so my cash flow was even higher. Well, the guy we sold it to, his wife died, and he just gave up, quit making payments, and I had to foreclose. So I foreclosed, got the house back, and now it's rented for $2,000 a month on a corporate rental. And it has been since January, and probably will be through next January. $2,000 a month.
That's amazing.
Pretty little deal.
You make it sound too easy, Leon. You make it sound easy.
It's just solving people's problems, making them happy.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like for the benefit, for the reward, it's like why would you not want to learn this and have another tool in your tool belt, like you said?
Be crazy not to. Be crazy.
Yeah. Seriously.
So anyway.
Okay. Well, I know I said last question, but I got one more. This is the last question for real this time. So Leon, you are the father of Adam Johnson. Some of y'all listening and watching, you've seen Adam on the podcast a few times, been a Carrot member for a long time. We met Adam, Trevor and I met him at an event a few years back. And I remember this guy in the middle of the room stands up in a cowboy hat. Someone's talking about Carrot. Trevor's up there speaking, and he says, I've never met him. And he says, I had Carrot before I had internet at my house. And I'm like, who is this guy? Go to the library, work on his Carrot site. And I'm like, I got to meet this guy. And he's awesome. I just love sharing that story. Anyways, met Adam a few years back. And I've had him on a few podcasts. I want to ask you, how's it been working alongside your son and bringing him up in real estate? Because family businesses can be hard. It could be hard, put stressors working in the family. What's that been like for you? Because we got a lot of listeners with kids that want to do what you're doing.
Oh man, yeah, it would be great. Absolutely, it's great. The kids have to have a desire. You can't just push it on them. But both my sons, Adam has an older brother, Chris Johnson, who happens to be a Mississippi State senator, real estate investor, and he owns a whole ton of H&R Block franchises. But I brought them both up in the business, and heck, I don't know, Adam could tell you when, but years ago, we did a bunch of wholesaling when they were kids. back before anybody knew what wholesaling was, we were doing wholesaling. We go to the courthouse steps and buy a house, 50 cents on the dollar, and an hour later have it sold for $9,000 or $10,000, and I'd split it with them, and they loved it.
Yeah.
Kids love that cash, and we did a lot of that, and but I started them out cutting bushes around the houses and pulling bushes and painting and cleaning and doing all those kind of things. They did all that.
Yeah.
When Christopher graduated college, he knew I bought a lot of houses through the years at foreclosure sales and pre-foreclosure. And he had just gotten his master's, and he was wanting to get married. He needed to make some money. And he said, "Hey, Dad, I found this trustee sale in the paper. Will you call on it for me?" So we called on that deal, and ended up going and buying it. I got out there with him. We cleaned junk out of the yard. The house was immaculate, but just kind of cleaned up the yard, sold it, and netted $44,000. And he got 22. I got 22, and he used that to buy a ring to propose to his wife now.
It's a good size ring. That'll do it.
And my grandkids have notes and properties that they rent. And they're 17 and 14.
That's awesome. So, that's got to feel good.
And they're learning about this sort of thing.
Yep. I love that. Yeah, I got to get that book, Invest in Debt. We'll put that link in the show notes. Well, shoot, I appreciate you coming on. This has been a lot of fun. We could do this all day. A quick recap, and feel free to plug anything in if I miss it. But what I got out of this conversation is you have to care enough to ask the right questions. Care about the person enough to ask the right questions. Be in the business of people management, not property management. It'll probably make property management a whole lot easier. And then I loved how you frame those conversations, how you come prepared with your IRS documents, and being educated enough to be confident in those conversations. And you're not mentioning the no words. You're not saying creative finance, and you're just breaking it down real simply for people and explaining the benefits that's in it for them, the tax savings. And lastly, if y'all listen to this whole podcast episode and are not checking out these books and going to learn about more creative finance, I don't know what to tell you, but put the tool in your tool belt, especially with not knowing where the market's headed, but have more strategies in your pocket. So that's all I got. Leon, any last words, any parting words for people listening?
You did a great recap there. Always be learning. I still study. I still try to learn new things and new ways of doing things. Just always be a student of what you're doing. And there's a lot of really good conferences out there that don't upsell you, that $400, $500, $600 that you can get a wealth of information from.
Absolutely.
Whole bunch of.
Never stop learning. Well, shoot, hope we get to meet you in person someday. Leon, thank you again. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Thank you for coming on the podcast, and everybody listening and watching. Have a great week. Oh, if you have any questions for Leon or myself, email them to me, brady@carrot.com. Anything we missed or you'd like to hear covered in the future, just email me, brady@carrot.com, and we'll talk about it on the next podcast. That being said, have a great week, y'all. We'll see you later.